an introduction to the philosophy of the human person. I'm your teacher, Mrs. Lovely Jimenez Supan. Our topic for today's session is all about knowledge and truth. After this lesson, you are expected to distinguish opinion from truth. Then, you're going to identify the meaning, importance, and source of knowledge. Lastly, you're going to describe the steps and processes of acquiring knowledge. Now, I want you to examine the picture carefully. Have you ever experienced believing in something you thought is true, but in the end, you discovered that it is false? For example, you feel that the person standing in front of you is a true friend who will never betray you, but in the end, he did betray you. Or during an examination period, you feel strongly that A is the right answer for item number 12, but it turned out to be B. Or you feel that your beliefs can guide you in the correct path only to discover that it leads to disaster. These and countless examples from your experiences show that there is a big difference to what we feel is true and what is really true. According to philosophy, if you want to know the truth, you have to use not emotions but thinking. To think, however, is an act of choice, which is not always done properly. Sometimes we need guidance to straighten our thoughts. This is what our lesson provides. Welcome to the province of epistemology. There is no correct definition of epistemology, but we're going to use from the philosopher Rand, 1990. According to her, epistemology is a science devoted to the discovery of the proper method of acquiring and validating knowledge. There are two purposes of epistemology. The first one, to show how we can acquire knowledge. Second, to give us a method of demonstrating whether the knowledge we acquired is really knowledge. Since knowledge plays a central role in epistemology, let us briefly describe its nature. According to Ms. Rand, knowledge is a mental grasp of reality reached either by the perceptual observation or by a process of reason based on perceptual observation. When you know something, be it the behavior of your friend, the movement of the planets, or the origin of civilizations, you understand its nature. You identify what it is, and it stays with you. Knowledge is a retained form of awareness. So, how do you acquire knowledge? Ms. Rand's definition gives us two ways. First, we can acquire knowledge using our senses. How do you know that the table is brown? Because you see it. How do you know that fire is hot? Because you feel it. This method of acquiring knowledge is called empiricism, and it has many adherents in the history of philosophy, such as John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. Second, we can acquire knowledge by thinking with the use of our minds, what philosophers call the rational faculty. This is what rationalism advocates. Some well-known rationalists in history are Rene Descartes, Baruch Spinoza, and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. However, thinking is just half of the story of knowing. In fact, the second half. The reason is that thinking involves content. To think is to think of something. You cannot think about nothing. This is where sense perception enters the picture by feeding our minds with data coming from the outside world so that we can have something to think about. Now, let us explore the first part of epistemology, the process of acquiring knowledge. 1. Reality. To know is to know something. This something is what philosophers call reality, existence, or being. Let us employ the term existence. Existence is everything there is. Another name for it is the universe. It includes everything we perceive, the animals, the plants, human beings, inanimate objects, and everything inside our heads, our thoughts and emotions, which represents our inner world. Existence is really all there is to know. If nothing exists, knowledge is impossible. Number 2, perception. Our first and only contact with reality is through our senses. Knowledge begins with the perceptual knowledge. At first, the senses give us knowledge of things or entities, what Aristotle calls primary substance, like for example, the dog, cat, chair, table, man. Later, we become aware not only of things but certain aspects of things like qualities, blue, hard, smooth, quantities, 7 inches or 6 pounds, relationships in front of, side of, even actions like jumping, running, and flying. These so-called Aristotelian categories cannot be separated from the entities that have it. Red, for example, cannot be separated from red objects. Walking cannot be separated from the person that walks. Now, let us take example in this picture. Yellow color cannot be separated from yellow flower, while me smelling the fragrance of this flower cannot be separated from it. Number 3 is concept. After we perceive things, we began to notice that some of the things we perceive are similar to other things. For example, we see 3 individuals, let's call them Juan, Pablo, and Pedro, who may have nothing in common at first glance, but when we compare them with another entity, a dog for example, suddenly their differences become insignificant. Their big difference to a dog highlights their similarity to one another. We therefore group them into one class or group, name the group as man or human being, and define what the group is to give it identify. Now, we have a concept which according to one dictionary means an abstract or generic idea generalized from particular instances. The first concept we form are concepts of things like dog, cat, man, house, and car. These elementary concepts are called first-level concepts. From these first-level concepts, we can form higher-level concepts through a process which Rand calls abstraction from abstractions. Now, let us describe the 2 types of abstraction from abstractions. First, wider generalizations or simply widenings. This is the process of forming wider and wider concepts. For example, from Juan, Pedro, and Pablo, we can form the concept man. Then, from man, dog, cat, monkey, we can form a higher and wider concept animals. And from plant and animal, we can form a still higher and wider concept, which is living organisms. As we go up to these progressive widenings, our knowledge increases. On the other hand, the second one, which is subdivisions, consists of identifying finer and finer distinctions. For example, man is a first-level concept that we can subdivide according to profession, doctor, entertainer, fireman, or teacher, or race, Asian, Caucasian, or black, or gender, man, woman, we have the lesbian and gay, or nationality, Filipino, Chinese, American, among other things. As we go down these progressive narrowings, our knowledge of things carried under a concept increases. As a result, the progressive widenings and narrowings is a levels of concepts whose base is sense perception. As we move farther from the perceptual-based, knowledge becomes more abstract, and as we move closer to the perceptual level, knowledge becomes more concrete. When we use concepts in order to classify or describe an existence, a particular that exists, be it an object, a person, an action, or event, we use what philosophers call a proposition. A proposition is a statement that expresses either an assertion or a denial that an existent belongs to a class or possesses certain attribute. Proposition is usually expressed in a declarative sentence. When I say, for example, that men are mortals, I am making an assertion of men which are affirmative in nature. When I make an opposite claim, however, men are not mortal, I am denying something about men, and thus my statement is negative in nature. Notice that statements like men are mortals, angels are not demons, and saints are not sinners can either be true or false. Truth and falsity are called the two possible truth values of the statement. Lastly, in the first part of acquiring knowledge, number 5 is inference. How do we demonstrate that the statement is true? By providing an argument. According to Hurley, an argument is a group of statements, one or more of which the premises are claimed to provide support for or reason to believe one of the others, the conclusion. To clarify this definition, let's give an example using the famous Socratic argument. All men are mortals. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. An argument expresses a reasoning process which logicians call inference. Arguments, however, is not the only form of inference, but logicians usually used arguments and inference interchangeably. Now that we know how we know, it's time to see whether the knowledge we acquired is really knowledge or it is really true. This is the second part of epistemology, validating one's knowledge. The first step in validating one's knowledge is to ask oneself the following question. How did I arrive at this belief? By what steps? Thus, what the ancient pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus said is true when applied to epistemology. The way up, knowledge acquisition, is the way down, which is knowledge validation. If we perform the process of reduction, we will realize that all true knowledge rests ultimately on sense perception. Now let us further discuss ways in determining the truthfulness of the statement. First one, a belief or a statement is true if it can be justified or proven through the use of one's senses. Let us consider the following statements. I am alive, I have a body, I can breathe. You can only validate the above statement if you observe yourself using your senses. Feel your body. Are you breathing? Feel your pulse. Observe your body. Is it moving? This and countless examples provided by your senses prove that you're alive. Second, a statement or belief is true if it is based on facts. Statements based on sense perception are factual, and if we base our beliefs on such facts, our beliefs are true. For example, the belief that human beings have the right to life rests on the following claim. First one, human beings are rational animals. Number two, animals including human beings are living organisms. A third way to determine if the statement is through a consensus, according to Abelia 2016. If the majority agrees that a statement is true, then it is true. However, there are certain limitations to this approach. For example, the vast majority of Germans during the time of Adolf Hitler believed that Jews are racially inferior. This is obviously false, supported by a pseudo-biological science of the Nazi. The result of this false consensus is the extermination of millions of Jews in many parts of Europe. A fourth way to determine whether a statement is true is to test it by means of actions. For example, if you want to know if a person is friendly, then the best way to find out is to approach the person. Thus, the famous Nike injunction of "just do it" is applicable in this situation. Now, I want you to analyze and examine carefully the following statements. Which do you think is the column that represents facts and which column represents opinions? If you answered that the left column represents facts while the right column represents opinions, then you are correct. Always remember that the statements or belief is truth if it is based on the facts or reality, can be confirmed with other sources, and independent of one's interpretation, preferences, and biases, while the statement or belief is an opinion if they are based on emotions, cannot be confirmed, open to interpretations, and inherently biased. Now, for the application of this lesson, I want you to write the differences and similarities between how empiricists and rationalists acquired knowledge using the Venn diagram. Now, class, I want you to read and remember this quotation of Honesty by Napoleon Hill. Thank you for watching. God bless us all.